Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I see very many people who are working in this room, who are working very hard. Higher? So I see very many people in this room who've are and have been working very hard to try to positively impact on service development internationally. So it's a real pleasure to be amongst you. I have 10 slides, 10 minutes, and it's 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and everyone's thinking about lunch. But let's see how we go. Thank you very much to Giuseppe and Raffaella for inviting me. Just to share something briefly about the experience we've had at HOPEnDialogue UK of developing and running a variety of training programs. So I probably have more questions than answers. It seems to often be the case. This seems to often be the case. So I'm really not going to go into too much detail of what the trainings are and what we've done, but just sort of maybe something of what I've learned along the way and questions that have been raised. So in terms of the levels of training, we started in, I think, 2012 with just 1- and 2-day seminars around the UK. And now, recently, we've added a 5-day workshop. But I wouldn't use the word training to describe sort of this level of involvement of participants. But still, I think it's very important to have a variety of ways of sharing these ideas and practices. And so the shorter approaches are also valid. But the main 2 trainings we've been running a 1-year foundation training, which we've run in London, in-house in the NHS, and also internationally. And in terms of this training, I mean, it's 20 days, so it's about 160 hours, and there's reading and also preparation for family of origin that the students do between the blocks. Then there's the 3 or the 4-year, which we've sometimes called the full training to distinguish it from the foundation training, which actually equates to 1,600 hours. So when we put together kind of all the theory days, the family of origin days, supervision, work with families and networks, reading, thesis, family of origin preparation work, and study groups, it adds up to a lot. And in terms of these trainings, we've worked closely with Volkmar, who's at the back there, on this training, and closely with Jaco, and Mary mentioned that she'd been involved as well, so I'm very grateful to Jaco, Mary, and Volkmar for all that you've done to help us to develop. All trainings have value, but my position is that where the emphasis is on foundation level training and services, it's also important to train some people to the 3- or 4-year level, and that echoes the point that Jaco was making earlier. Some of you will know that I've been working for the past few years, and I'm very soon I'm going to be able to say I've finished working on a book on open dialogue and psychosis. And as part of that book, what we've decided to do is to develop an online compendium of international services, which we've been working on. And then the question for me in my mind is, if there's many different trainings, how do we sort of recognize that in terms of this compendium of services? And as far as we've got with that is that we ask people to say what level of training they've done in their service. And that's sort of, I suppose, transparent, that there are different levels and different ways. What I should say about the 3- or the 4-year training, it's 3 years in London, but it up till the last iteration of the training, it was 4 years in Western Lapland. So it's based very much on the Western Lapland training, is that we don't break that down into levels. So it's a process that people are in together for 3 years. So it's not sort of level 1, level 2, level 3. It may be that when we move forward, we need to link it to the foundation training, and there could be a separation there, which there already is. But we want to have that experience of people being in these processes together continuously over this period of time. So in terms of the foundation training, I think the main idea for me about this is that it's enough to enable people to start to practice, to really get started. And then the idea is that, more learning is needed. Of course, more learning is always needed, but that ongoing learning and supervision can take place in services. Supervision is not usually part of this training, though some can be included, and live family meetings are also a possibility. But one of the differences, in terms of how we've run it up till now, is less supervision. There is reading material, and students can read between the blocks, but there's also a good deal of new material that's been created in order to introduce aspects of practice and theory, and then students can go deeper if they want to. Not everyone seems to be excited about a lot of sort of theoretical reading, so we've condensed some of that. And the emphasis on this training is very much on practice, exercises and role plays as well as process. And I think it's particularly helpful for people who don't yet have the opportunity to start to practice in their services, because they can practice a lot on the training. We do quite a lot of role plays of network meetings, etc., and introductory exercises that come before that. One of the adaptations we've made, not all foundation trainings have family of origin work, but we have included 3 days of family of origin work in our foundation training. The 3 or 4 year training, my sense of this is that students have more responsibility for their own process in the longer training, that we have more time and there's more, we're perhaps not sort of feeding them quite as much. They have to sort of find their way into it. Much more supervision, 21 days on the training itself, as well as supervision that can be arranged within services between blocks, and 13 days of family of origin. And much more in-depth reading is required, whereas in the other training it's more of a sense of it's more optional. I think in the 3 years there's more time for group processes to evolve. One of the very important aspects for me of this training is what comes up in the group, what comes up in group process, and how can we as trainers sort of facilitate that and work with that. And I think there's more opportunity to do that in longer trainings. Sometimes it seems that maybe we go through an idealization phase at the start, and then we hit some sort of sticky stuff together, and we can start to work through that. And I think the learning on that level is really important. And yes, there was a requirement for practice on this longer training, 300 hours, and the students have to really be able to their work. In terms of the trainers training, the main trainers training, well, there's 2 ways that I know that it's been happening. One is a 2-year program that Jaakko and others have been facilitating in Helsinki, and it's also been adapted to be part of the 3-year training that we've done in London the first time, and also there's a training currently going on in Sydney. But there's a question, are there other routes to being an open dialogue trainer? And if so, what are these? And it's just a question. Can there be different processes for trainers running a foundation training program to those running the more longer term program? Is there a role for mentors, people who haven't completed a trainer's training program but have participated in a previous training and can thus support a subsequent training in collaboration with trainers? So these are just questions that I think it's important for us to consider together, and is there a way of sort of coordinating this internationally, of course. So some key issues. In terms of participants, it's been my experience of, I think it's getting on for 200 people now that have been involved in one of the 2 sort of 1-year or 3-year trainings. The vast majority of those who have participated have expressed enthusiasm, have showed enthusiasm about the approach, which is good. It's great because there's a great variety of people who are coming, and I think I would add to that, it makes sense to them. This approach makes sense to people who've been working in the system, most people who've been working in the system for some time. However, there is a noticeable difference when people self-select onto trainings in comparison to those who participate because their service has signed up, in terms of the level of enthusiasm, but also the level of skill. And if we want to develop existing services, we need to train staff with a wide variety of professional backgrounds and skills, with some having had no prior therapeutic training or experience, and others may be very experienced. There's different appetites for reading, and people wanting and needing different teaching methods. We can't please everyone, but how can we create a variety of ways into this way of working? In terms of developing practice and services and how that links to training, in my experience, it's not unusual for there to be, money can be found for training, but perhaps not the necessary investment in developing the service, and not enough communication between those funding training and managers of services. So people have the skills, but not so much opportunity to practice, and that's pretty tragic. It's easier to fund something new and innovative than it is to find ongoing funding. And if we really want to, embed this, we need ways of being able to sustain it in an ongoing way. There's been at least 2 or 3 times that, where I've been involved where it's come to light that a single person in a position of power is able to block service development because of some opposition to the model. And obviously that can be very frustrating. And then, because of that and for other reasons, it can be difficult to develop opportunities to practice both in public services and elsewhere. In terms of the services we've been involved with, though, there's been a significant variety in terms of the ways services are being developed with different limitations in different services. I'm not going to go into detail of that, but it makes me think about the HOPEnDialogue project and the criteria for that in terms of how much of an adaptation is possible in order to still participate. And then, yes, there may be limited opportunities for in-service dialogical supervision between training blocks. And if we've got 6 months between our supervision blocks, that feels too long to me. So how do we manage that? Some key issues relating to international equivalence. To what extent is there a need and a possibility for international coordination of levels of training? Can this be achieved without killing the spirit of the approach and the creativity which is at the heart of the approach and helps it to evolve? In terms of that, I should say I've met people who have attended a 5-day workshop who told me they are now trained in HOPEnDialogue. That's a bit different from my understanding, but it happens. So as this develops, people can have their own ideas. There's also been experiences where people have wanted to train others after limited experience of having training and practice themselves. And if we compare this to probably it's been a minimum of 10 or 15-year process in Western Lapland traditionally for people to become a trainer. There's an understandable enthusiasm to develop services quickly, but the problematics of just having a short-term vision. There was one service that were interested and said we can find money for training, but only if the people that you're training for 1 year can do the training from then on. And I've had to say, no, I don't think that's possible. So that's just an example. There's a lack of dialogical literature in different languages. At HOPEnDialogue UK, we've started supporting the translation of articles and materials into French. And hope to be able to support other translations, but this is, I think, an issue as we start to develop elsewhere. In terms of peer workers and specialists, we've included peer workers, specialists, people with lived experience in all of our trainings. This brings a greater diversity of voices, experiences, and styles into the training group, which can be challenging, but also refreshing and rewarding. As well as a learning experience, it's been my experience that this process can be a healing experience as well, as people in very different roles share their perspectives and experiences and find each other in the group. The strongest experience out of that was in Queensland, Australia, where we had 15 peers and 15 clinicians training together for a year. And it was a very moving experience. The differences between participants can be significant, but once we get started with a new training group, I'm not really focused on people's different roles. It's a group of people together learning, releasing, and grappling together with the experience and the approach. And then there's no specific adaptations, as Mary said, and similar for us, no specific adaptations of trainings when including peers. Finally, accreditation. Currently, it looks like the only way for the 3 or 4 year training to be accredited in the UK by the UKCP is as a family therapy training, but we're in dialogue with them about creating a new HOPEnDialogue section. I'm not sure how far we'll get with that. But we've also got many people from Europe on our trainings in London, and they want us to pursue European accreditation as well as UK accreditation. And so we'll be looking into this to the extent that we can with Brexit, as well as other forms of international accreditation. And then also it's worth mentioning, some of you may not be aware that in Finland, full trainings to the level of family therapists or psychotherapists now have to be affiliated to universities. And this has had an impact on Western Lapland as a result that not all staff can be trained to this level in what I was told as nurses without a university degree can't participate. And so they're now starting a 3-year training unaffiliated to a university, which means that participants won't be accredited to the level of family therapists, but means that they have sort of more control of their training and can keep the high level of quality of training in their service. So this is an issue they're grappling with in Western Lapland, as well as we are elsewhere. So that's as far as I got. Thank you.